February, you were already in Ukraine, and you went to the east. Following that trip, we had a good chat, and you told me that you were impressed with the consequences of the war waged by Russia against Ukraine. Earlier today, we had detailed conversation following your visit to Bucha, and Elena was even more impressed. She saw the level of devastation and death that was brought about by Russia with its aggression. I do hope that all German citizens who keep an eye on this war in Ukraine will understand the simple fact that on a daily basis, Ukrainians, peaceful Ukrainians, either die of the Russian artillery, not necessarily along the front line, as a matter of fact. Your house and wherever it is located in Ukraine can be hit by Russian artillery or missiles. Like a couple of weeks ago, family was hit. A young mom with a 3-month toddler was killed in Odessa by Russian missile. Earlier today, Lena had a chance to visit the neighborhood of Bucha. 44 bodies were extracted from rubbles. The building had been destroyed in early March, 2 months ago, and it was directly hit by a Russian artillery projectile. So thing is that imagine yourself staying at home, maybe having some family around, and putting your kids to sleep, and all of a sudden, within 1 second, your life stops, all because Russia is just willing to occupy your city, to break into your home, to take it away from you, period. I want everyone to understand the reality in which we Ukrainians live every day now. Not a single person, either somebody who is in their Izum, close to the front line, or being in the rear. Nobody is sure, and you can be hit by a Russian missile at any time, anywhere across the country. Let me take the opportunity to thank Germany for having turned around its stance on a number of issues. On February 24th, indeed, we saw the first Russian missile hitting Kyiv, and at the same time, same missile hit Germany's traditional political course, which was changed, luckily, with regard to delivery of weapons to Ukraine. Chancellor Scholz declared the beginning of a new policy with regard to Russia. We have also heard other German politicians admitting the fact that the previous course was a mistake, was untenable with regard to Russia. Now it is the future of European security and prosperity that is being decided at this front, whether we manage to stop Putin here in Ukraine, or if he will able to turn Ukraine into an advanced outpost for his future invasion into other European countries. The future of Europe hinges on this, on how this evolves. Ukraine sees everything in this situation very much. We're not trying to get any other European country involved, nor are we asking them to send soldiers to fight for us. No, we are shedding our own blood for our land and for the future security and economic prosperity of Europe as a whole. Therefore, we expect European countries to be able to continue to provide all the support Ukraine needs, be it in the form of sanctions, weapons, or economic assistance. I don't think one can find a single international document, or even a history book or a textbook on wars, that would treat the transferring of arms or the use of sanctions as constituting a participation or an involvement of a country in a war or in a conflict, or entailing such participation on the part of the assistance providing nation. Who benefits from Ukraine being left alone? Putin will be interested, of course, in being able to fight against Ukraine, to multiply tragic experiences similar to that of Bucha. If Ukraine is left alone, face-to-face with aggressor. Therefore, we had a substantive talk with Anna-Lena and I, we had with regard to European integration of Ukraine, with regard to assistance. Both of us are interested in seeing the sixth package of sanctions being improved as soon as possible. I am happy that Germany is promoting imposing embargo on all imports from Russia and is trying to actually overcome Hungary's reluctance to join the embargo, because this is something that is unthinkable, whereby Europe on the one hand assists Ukraine, on the other hand also using, the same group of nations help Russia and fill Russia's fiscs with cash to be able to continue the war. And then I discussed the issue of European integration of Ukraine. We are thankful to Germany for admitting our and recognizing our European ambition and aspiration, believing that Ukraine is a member of the European family. The issue of our membership in the EU is a matter of life and death, actually. The very fact, the understanding that Europe is no longer pursuing a policy of failure to understand with regard to Ukraine's prospect to join will prevent Russia from blocking that course. Because the reason the war started was because Putin was sure that Europe did not want Ukraine to join the European membership. He was mistaken, and we are happy to the European Union at large, and particularly to Germany. Now it's that time. A next step was done, right? Was made, and in order for Ukraine to be given the status of candidate country. To eventually join the European Union. Anna-Lena was impressed actually by the destructions and crimes committed by Russians, and therefore it was a separate talk that we had about holding them accountable and being brought to justice. Also, let me try and tell you that at some point in time, the Nazi regime once committed a terrible crime against Europe as a whole. And Europe had to go through a process of repentance to make sure that those crimes are not committed again. So never again is the motto. Whereas now we are dealing with a new version of fascism, which is referred to as Russism. And I'm also convinced that the Russians will undergo a process of repentance for the crimes that are committed in their name. They must be held accountable, brought to justice according to the international law. Ukraine is now standing for the territorial integrity, and Germany is standing by the Ukraine in our aspiration to keep our territorial integrity. This is a great historic turning point. I'm grateful to the German government for this position. We still have a few issues in which we will continue discussions, but in general, our relations are evolving in a positive trend, and I'm convinced that we will be able to find a mutually acceptable solution to all the issues that are on the table right now in our agenda. Thank you very much.
Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, colleague,
Dear
Dmytro, I am very, very glad, not just as German Foreign Minister, but to be here as a friend, to be here in Kyiv, and to be in a free Kyiv. And to be honest, in the dark days since the 24th of February, I had my doubts as to whether I would be able to say these words. I had hoped, I was hoping like everyone was hoping, but we were just as desperate in view of the brutality that we witnessed in February. We were shocked in the face of this unbridled brutality and the resoluteness of Russia to not just attack this city of liberty, but to attack the entire existence of this entire country, to aim to destroy it. And the courage with which the Ukrainian people, the women and men of Ukraine, have stopped that happening is something we can hardly describe. And at the same time, what you just emphasized is so important. This war in what remains, thank God, a free city. This war is not over. A missile can hit anywhere in this country at any time. And at the same time, my visit today means for our country, for the entire free world, that since the 24th of February, without any doubt, adamantly stand with Ukraine and a free Kyiv. We have understood all too clearly that economic dependencies do not give us security if the aggressor doesn't care about the well-being of his peoples. And this is why we are reducing our dependence on Russian energy to zero, consistently and forever. We will not be able to change the geography of Europe, but we will make it clear together that since the 24th of February, there can be no agreement with Russia. We will not budge on our sanctions by a single millimeter without including Ukrainians in the decision. The never again. Never again can we have it in Ukraine that in the face of an aggressor who ignores all rules and international laws, there cannot be peace. And this never again means that we stand with Ukraine to ensure that never again will there be impunity for the war crimes committed by Russia, for the forcible displacements, the murderers and the rapists. And this is why we will support the international investigations, particularly the International Criminal Court. We will support them politically, financially, and will second German personnel to help them as well. And you referred to this in your remarks. I was with the public prosecutor general in Bucha and in Irpin today of the International Criminal Court, and it made it clear to me how important this international public prosecution is, but also national prosecution. The images, it's one thing to see the images of murdered men, women, and children in the newspaper in Germany, but it's a completely different thing to be there on the ground where these people were buried, were finally buried, after their bodies had lain for days on the roads. And therefore, we don't just support the work of the International Criminal Court, but I said today in speaking with the Public Prosecutor General that we will coordinate international support better because there is enough funding now for this work. But when it comes to forensics, we in Germany want to offer more support. In addition, 2 public prosecutors for sexual violent crimes will be freed up to investigate this very important work. And my visit today and my conversation with the Public Prosecutor General of the International Criminal Court made it so clear to me that it's not just about collecting advice from Bucha and Irpin, but also collecting evidence from the millions who have fled their homes, who experienced the most awful crimes before they fled, not just how the people they loved were murdered, but how they themselves became the victims of violence, of war crimes, of rapes. And this is why we will increase the collection of evidence in Germany as well, and will step this collection of evidence up and use it together for this purpose. In addition, it is important that people who have lost everything they had, and in Irpin this became so very clear to me, that an entire city was largely able to flee Irpin, and they need to have the opportunity to come back, on the one hand in terms of the housing available to them there, but also in terms of mine clearance and rebuilding their lives there. And regarding mine clearance, we as the Federal Republic of Germany will offer more support in the future, because it's not just about the mine clearance militarily, where we have been working with you for a long time, but it's also about clearing mines in villages and towns and cities, and to make progress with this so that people can come back to their homes. But never again also means that those who were attacked, who are under attack, Ukrainians, will not be left alone in their battle for survival. Supplying weapons is not an end in itself. Supplying weapons in this situation, where a brutal war of aggression has been unleashed against your country and is still being waged from the regions that are living in peace, you have managed to defend yourselves. Supplying weapons means that there won't be even more of these war crimes that I saw with my own eyes today in your country, particularly in the east of the country. We want to prevent this through supplying weapons. And I'll say it so clearly because the visit of a foreign minister is always important in terms of what we're doing as Germany in another country. I cannot forget that these weapons are being supplied to ensure that war crimes are not committed in other places. You talked about the mother with her 3-month-old daughter and lost it when a missile took everything important to her. And this book that I received today contains that case. Over 200 children who, since the 24th of February, have had their lives stolen from them, who have been killed, and not just as a foreign minister, but as a mother, as a father, that breaks your heart. And this is our responsibility. And this is why we are supporting your country even more now, in military terms as well. That means that on top of the weapons that we've already supplied, in the days to come, we will be training Ukrainian soldiers with the modern tank howitzer 2000 that we will be delivering together with our colleagues in the Netherlands. And we'll be working with German industry to ensure that the Ukrainians get highly modern systems in order to protect their cities from attacks in the future, even better than they did. The European Free Ukraine we will continue to support in terms of humanitarian, financial, economic, technological, political, and energy ways, not just today, but tomorrow and in the long term. And this is why today we are reopening our embassy in Kyiv once again, to begin with on a small scale, with limited hours of operation. And I'm very grateful that Ambassador Feldhusen is here, has come along with us here today, and will continue her work here in your free city. Dmytro, the very fact that we are here today shows how deluded Putin is. He believed that our European values, liberty and humaneness, make people weak and decadent. Ukraine has proved that the opposite is true. Your will to liberty makes you strong. And the knowledge that you are fighting for your humanity against an army driven by cynicism and terror. Thus, your battle is a battle for a liberal democracy and against an autocratic regime. Many who believed that democracies were obsolete will draw their conclusions based on your actions here. You alone are paying a heartbreaking, unimaginable price. But your success is also the success of millions of people in the world fighting for liberty and peace and placing their hopes on these values. And this is why today the vast majority of the international community is with Ukraine. And for this reason as well, it is clear to me that Ukraine is an intrinsic part of Europe. I very much hope that your aspirations to join the EU will get a strong response, even though becoming a full EU member is a long process that cannot be shortened. What we don't want are false promises that we cannot deliver on. But let me emphasize here that becoming a full membership is a difficult job. In the European Union, we need to have a further reform. We need to increase our cooperation. This is something we've learned from this brutal war of aggression. But I also want to say that the moment has not come to focus on red tape and bureaucracy. We need to take a clear position in the hour of war and peace. And if we talk about the candidate status of Ukraine, I believe that the President of the EU Commission who invited you to apply will find a good way to ensure that these are not empty promises, but that we will pave the way for your role in the European Union and make it clear that Ukraine belongs to the European Union in the long term. It's my firm conviction that when this war is over, and this war will end, how long it will continue, I'm afraid we do not know. But when it ends, Ukraine will be free and will decide its own destiny. That is our goal, and we are working together with you to achieve this. Thank you. And the first question from Deutsche Welle. Matthias Böhlinger here, Deutsche Welle. A question to Mr. Kuleba. Occasionally you get angry about Germany. Recently, in the case when there was the ban of the flag in the memorial ceremony on the 8th of May, what do you think would have to happen to ensure that our relationship is the way it was before this war? And to Foreign Minister Baerbock on the 8th, in early February, you were here and you spoke clearly against supplying weapons. Do you regret that now? And is that perhaps one of the reasons why Germany has always been a little bit behind the other partners when it comes to the weapons question in Ukraine?
First off, in my life, never have I been offended or ouching against everybody. No, this is not. This is something that is not part of my character. With regard to the episode that you mentioned, I would rather refrain from generalizing. It was not a decision made by the federal government of Germany to put a ban on the Ukrainian flags. No, the decision was made by the city of Berlin. I think that decision was not well thought out and was of a discriminatory nature, equating the symbols of a country that is the aggressor on the one hand, to the country that is defending itself and facing all this aggression, whose citizens die, and who, by the way, is protecting the same values that city of Berlin is so proud of, which is democracy, pluralism, and freedom. So, if that happened, if somebody in the Berlin mayor's office or the Berlin police, I don't know, decided that neutrality is the best approach and that everything should be banned to do anything at all, then this approach, I think, is not only wrong, deeply wrong, but also morally criminal. I continue to insist on this. If, for someone, the flag of Ukraine is identical to that of Russia, well, something is wrong with the people who make such decisions, and we need to talk to them in order to find out what exactly is wrong with them. What was that all? That was it. Okay. And okay, go to Annalena, please.
Regarding your response, just before the war broke out, I was here and I said to the German House of Parliament, the Bundestag, that if we're going to change our policy, we have to do this fully conscious of the consequences. And we did that on the 24th of February. In the weeks before, we did not do that. And we were indeed here at a common press conference, because if you change your route, you can't say 2 days later, oh, actually, we changed our mind. And that was before this brutal war of aggression was unleashed. It was a consideration then because Germany at the time was responsible with France for getting the Minsk Accords back on track. And that was our mandate at the time. And I personally always had to weigh things up. And I knew that if we take a different step just before the 24th of February, wouldn't that perhaps be just the excuse that the Russian president was waiting for to say, well, now I can declare war on Ukraine because all of these negotiations that Germany was supposedly supporting clearly were not meant fairly. And then on the 24th of February, in the moment where the Russian president made it all too clear that he was not planning to negotiate at all, but rather had lied to our faces, we changed our political course by making it clear that we would now supply weapons to Ukraine, because the opportunity of negotiation had been bombed out of the water by the Russian President, Vladimir Putin, and by no one else. And then that one comment that you just made here, in that moment, we decided to act, and Germany has a leading role as one of the greatest industrial countries in the European Union in terms of the economy. We see that when it comes to phasing out fossil fuels. As Europeans, we can only do this together, and that's why it's important to me that every step that we announce publicly, that we have thought it through in a sustainable manner. And I made this clear with the sanctions. You can't just roll back sanctions if you get a sense that this is impacting on our economy in Germany. No, it is only when Ukraine is free and can determine its own destiny and says we can live with our neighbors in peace can we do this. And the same is true for delivering weapons. And we know that in terms of the European armed forces, because we wanted to live in peace, and that meant that we didn't always have the defense capability that we needed to 100% at any given time. And this is why we had to set clear priorities of what we're going to deliver when. And I don't think we are lagging here behind. If we look at what we've already delivered to Ukraine, we're talking 16 rounds of ammunition, thousands of grenades and explosives, thousands of rocket-powered grenades, thousands of anti-aircraft armaments, Stingers and Strahlers, but also military equipment like night vision telescopes, paramilitary gear, ground-mounted radars, etc. And we had to look at what we could do in terms of armored vehicles, but we realized that when it comes to the Leopards, we can deliver the Leopards. We want to deliver the Leopards, but we haven't got the ammunition. And we have to be honest about this, because what's the point if you promise something for defense and then you can only deliver part of the promise? And this is why we are currently looking at all of the countries who can deliver this ammunition to deliver the ammunition for the Leopards. And like I said, the next step are highly modern tank howitzers, which means that we need to be able to use these as drone defense and as ground-mounted radar. And I happen to be here, and it's hardly coincidence that I'm here with my Dutch Foreign Minister colleague Wopke Hoekstra. We came here together on the train, and in recent weeks we've worked together to ensure that between Netherlands and Germany we deliver these tank howitzers, because it's the case here that one country cannot deliver everything alone, because we don't have enough for our own defense capabilities. We will be providing 7, and the training that is necessary to operate them is going to begin now, and the deliveries will be concluded before the training can get going as well. So we want them both to dovetail. When the howitzers come, the soldiers will be trained to use them.
You're watching DW News live from Berlin. German Foreign Minister Baerbock is in Ukraine. We've been listening to her and her Ukrainian counterpart, Dmytro Kuleba, speaking to the media. Let's cross over now to DW correspondent Fanny Fashar, who is in the Ukrainian capital. Fanny, what was the German Foreign Minister's main message?
Basically, that Germany stands by Ukraine, that they do express this solidarity not just by going to Bucha. That was one of the first visits, basically, during this short trip. We do not know exactly how long it's going to take. A lot of things are secret revolving around this trip. But the fact that she paid her respect to Bucha first and now talking about the very important element there, that people need to be held accountable who committed those crimes, that according to human rights organizations, but also a lot of Western allies here of Ukraine, amount or are equal to war crimes. These are all words that Ukrainians really want to hear. These are the things that people were actually anticipating already to hear from Germany. But nobody so far from the German government came to visit, except now the foreign minister. There was a lot of diplomatic row in between Berlin and Kyiv over the past few weeks. So now having this press conference there in between the German foreign minister and her Ukrainian counterpart Kuleba is really, as Ukraine already says, a historical turning point, given the fact that now it's quite clear that Germany really wants to be not just talking about solidarity, but really actively supporting this country, and not just with a few thousand helmets, as they were planning to do prior to the beginning of this war, but with heavy weaponry. Now, in practical terms, of course, some of that weaponry is something that Ukrainian soldiers need to be taught how to actually apply. So as we have heard there from Foreign Minister Baerbock, apparently trainings on the howitzer are about to begin in Germany. But also, and this is actually what people here in Ukraine were looking forward to hearing, is that Germany says we are going to support, Germany is going to support Ukraine when it comes to the EU membership. However, at the same time, they of course want to keep all of that realistic, saying that this is not going to happen overnight. There is not going to be a shortcut when it comes to EU membership. However, and we have to remember, people took to the streets end of 2013 here in Kyiv. People were dying because of their longing towards the West, towards the European Union. In fact, Kuleba, the foreign minister of Ukraine, said this is an issue of life and death, the EU membership. But once again, here Germany really wants to keep those hopes quite realistic, that this is something that's not going to happen overnight.
Having said that, were there any remaining points of tensions?
It seems for now, especially now that President Zelensky and Foreign Minister Baerbock have met as well, it seems like everything is in a restart mode at this point. You have to know there was a lot of discussion, a resentment almost diplomatically, as President Steinmeier, Germany's President Steinmeier, was uninvited by the Ukrainian officials here over, well, first of all, over some allegations there that his connections are quite close with Russia, given his former functions before he became president in Germany, when he was foreign minister among the cabinet of the former Chancellor Merkel. But it seems like all of this has been sorted, and it seems, as I say, because we have to see whether practical things are going to follow here to these new commitments. But it seems as if Germany is really stepping up, and some people really wonder whether it had to do maybe also a little bit with that push that came a week ago from the opposition leader, Merz, who was here actually just a week ago, basically saying that the German government needs to step up. So it's quite likely that after the foreign minister being here now, that maybe German Chancellor Scholz and even President Steinmeier may follow next to underline these commitments of partnership with Ukraine.
And Fanny, can you give us a quick update of what's happening in eastern Ukraine?
The situation there, it's really difficult to establish the full picture, but one thing is certain, that fighting rages on. However, it's not just an advancement that's been made over the past couple of weeks since the Russian forces have withdrawn from Kyiv. It's not just the Russian forces who have made some advancements in the southern and in the eastern part of Ukraine. Also, we're hearing that actually Ukrainian forces are stepping up, trying to actually have a counteroffensive underway in the northeastern part of Ukraine around Kharkiv, trying to actually make sure that the Russian forces withdraw from these villages, basically not trying to avoid that they take Kharkiv, which was really the risk over the past weeks. It seems like that the Ukrainian forces are succeeding in trying to keep the Russian forces away from Kharkiv. But the situation and the picture all over remains quite blurry. In fact, some observers say that it seems like this is going to be a very prolonged war, and the standoff seems to be quite likely in many parts of Ukraine.
Fanny Fashar reporting from the Ukrainian capital, Kyiv. Thank you very much, Fanny. We're going to turn our attention now to Asia, where the son of former Philippines dictator Ferdinand Marcos is set to become the country's next leader. Ferdinand Marcos Jr. is poised to win the presidential election with more than twice as many votes as his main rival. His expected victory has sparked protests in the capital, Manila, with demonstrators alleging voting irregularities. The candidate, popularly known as Bongbong, has released a statement in which he asks people to, quote, "Judge me not by my ancestors, but by my actions." His running mate, Sara Duterte Carpio, daughter of the controversial outgoing president, is likely to become vice president. Critics regard a Marcos Duterte victory as a blow to democracy and civil rights.
Late on Monday, the name of the presidential election winner was clear. Shouts rang out for BBM, the nickname for Ferdinand Bongbong Marcos Jr. As news of the election results spread, his supporters took to the streets to celebrate. The candidate himself reached out to his supporters.
I want to thank you for all you have done for us. There are thousands of you out there, volunteers, parallel groups, political leaders that have cast their lot with us. Because of their belief in our message of unity, because of their belief in the candidates.
His win cements his family's return to power in the Philippines following the revolution that toppled his late father in 1986. The elder Ferdinand Marcos ruled the Philippines as a dictator for 2 decades, and his tenure was infamous for its corruption and brutality. For many, it was unthinkable that the Marcos clan would ever run for the highest office again. After returning from exile, the Marcoses returned to public life in the Philippines, with several family members taking on political positions. Many of Bongbong's younger supporters don't connect him to his father's crimes.